আলহামদুলিল্লাহ আল্লাহ সুবহানাহু ওয়া তাআলা আমরা তৌফিক দান করছেন ঈশার নামাজটা পড়তাম জামাতের সাথে বহুত বড় আল্লাহর নিয়ামত শুক্রবারের রাত মানুষ ভাড়া স্পেশালি এখন যে তারা ফেস্টিভ টাইম আছে কত জাতর তারা তা খোয়া যায় তা মসজিদে খাওয়া যায় না স্পেশালি টাইমও বাড়া গেলে বোঝা যায় কাম করিয়া তারা লগে জানি কি কি মহল তারা একটা সৃষ্টি করে চায় আর কিতার দাজনও তারা পালন করে বেশিরভাগ তারা জানেও না তারা কয় ক্রিসমাস ক্রিসমাস ইভেন দো এখন আসলেও আমরা আপনার সবই মুরব্বী আমিও আলহামদুলিল্লাহ দেখছি যুগে যুগে খেলা চেঞ্জ হয়েছে আমরা ছোট থাকতে বড় হয়েছি স্কুলে গেছি মনে করছি তা সত্য সত্যি বাট এখন খুঁজে ইন্টারনেটের যে জবান আর সাইড বাই ইনফরমেশন তারা নিজের তাও বলে এটা আসলে সব কিছু মিশা কারণ ঈসা আলাইহিস সালাম এমন একদিনও জন্ম হইছেন না তারার কিতাবর কথা আমরা কোরআন হাদিস হলো তারার কিতাবর কথা তান জবলা জন্ম হয় এই সময় মানে জবলা আমরা দেশে কিতাব দান খেতো আবাদের জন্য হার্ভেস্ট একটা হয় ওই সময় তারার হিসাবে ওই সময় তান জন্ম হয়েছে সো নো ওয়ে টাইম ই ডিসেম্বরের সময় তান জন্ম হয়েছে কারণ যারা গেছেন আপনারা জেরুজালেম ফিলিস্তিন যারা গেছেন বা গিয়া থাকলে ইটার সময় খুব স্নো দেয় খুব ঠান্ডা থাকে বুঝা লাগে যেমন মিডল ইস্টের দেশ এটা ঠান্ডা পড়তো না আসলে লন্ডনটা কি একমতে মানে বিকজ আবহাওয়াটা ডিফারেন্ট এলা ঠান্ডা না ফুললেও খুব স্নো দেয় সো এলা কোনো রেকর্ড নাই তার জন্ম সময় স্নো আছে বা কিছু আছে সো ফ্রম দ্যাট লং উই নো দ্য হোল থিং ইজ অ্যাবসলিউটলি মেড আপ এটা তারা বানাইছে সো এটা কি আমরা ইতিহাসটা আমরা জানা খুব জরুর আর আলহামদুলিল্লাহ লাস্ট উইক we talked about 300 years very briefly তা খুব অল্প জিনিস তা হইয়া গেছে 300 বছর 350 বছরের ইতিহাস হওয়া এটা আমার এটা যুগ না হাসা হতা হইলে আর এক সেশনও বইয়া হওয়া এটা ইজ ইম্পসিবল অনেক জিনিস হল হইয়া গেছে আমরা নবী সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লাম থেকে সাহাবা আজমাইন তাবেঈন থেকে স্পেনও যে জিনিসটা তারা সৃষ্টি করছিল যে মহলটা সৃষ্টি করছিল আস্তা স্পেন সাদার্ন ফ্রান্স 350 বছর প্রায় পুরা মুসলমানের কন্ট্রোলে আছে আর সবচেয়ে মানে অবাক জিনিস হলো কি তারা জায়গাটা দখল করছেন 60 থেকে 100 বছরের ভিতরে এক জেনারেশনও না এক জেনারেশনটা কি কম যারা ফলা শুরু করছে 711 from 711 to 716 all the way halfway up to France তারা দখল করে নিয়েছে বলে মানুষ মুসলমান হইতে প্রায় 150 থেকে 200 বছর লাগছে বেশিরভাগ মুসলমান হইছে একেবারে উমাইয়াদ জবানা যেটা কি তারা সম্রাট একেবারে শেষে দিন at the time of Abdul Rahman III who claimed to be a khalifa ওই সময় স্প্যানিশ যারা মানুষ তারা সব সময় মুসলমান হয়ে গেছে কারণ এমন এক কালচার তারা মানে বিকজ আমরা দিনটা খুব জাস্ট আল্লাহ সুবহানাহু ওয়া তাআলা যে দিন কোরআন যে একটা নবী সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লাম দেখাই গেছেন সাহাবা ইমান যে একটা এস্টাবলিশ করছেন এটা ইজ জাস্ট সো তারা একটা দেখা দেখি এমনও তারা যাচ্ছে মুসলমান হয়েছে আর অনেক ছিল তারা প্রিস্ট ক্লাসি যারা খুব কড়া তারা চাইছে না মুসলমান হইতো বা কোনো লাখান পারছে না একটাই তো মানুষ মুসলমান হইবা লাগি ওই সময় তারা বিভিন্ন ধরনের মানে হামলা শুরু করছে যেগুলা চাইছে আর কোনো কিছু পারছে না যেগুলা খামে ওই সময় তারা মানে ইসলামের সম্বন্ধে না নবী সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লামের সম্বন্ধে কারণ ইসলামের সম্বন্ধে একটা মাত্রা একটা জিনিস আছে এটা লইয়া আলোচনা হইব ডিবেট হইতে পারবো নো প্রবলেম বাট যেগুলা তারা নবী সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লাম সম্বন্ধে যেগুলা খুব বাদ মাতিছে সেই সময় তো আর সহ্য হয়েছে না সময় তারা আর পানিশমেন্ট করেছে আর ও নিয়ত তারা করছে না দেখাইতেছে মুসলমান তারা দোনো ও লাভিং কেয়ারিং তারা যেগুলা দেখাইতেছে বাট এটা একটা জিনিস আমার নবীর সম্বন্ধে তুমি মাতি আর আমি ওলা বই রইব ওটা হইতে পারবো নো ওয়ে তারা ইলাফাই আইছে তারা ডং করছেন ঈসা আলাইহিস সালাম রলিয়া ঈসা আলাইহিস সালামের হাওয়ারিন রলিয়া এটা লইয়া সবটা লইয়া তারা ডং করছে কি তারা লাগি তারা কালচারটা ঠিক আছে এর মানে না যেন আমরা নবী সাল্লাল্লাহু আলাইহি ওয়াসাল্লাম বলে ওলা হাসান মাতিব আর আমরা ওলা বই রইব পাশে কেউ কিছু করতো না ইন আ প্রপার ইসলামিক এনভায়রনমেন্ট ইন an Islamic state we're not talking about France now we're talking about pure in an age in a time when Muslims ruled there was justice so how can you speak about Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and in such a bad way not face some repercussion so they face some so they just call like a martyrdom movement মানে তারা শহীদ হয়ে যেতেছে অন্যতেও করছে এটা তারা নিয়ত তো খারাপ আসছে বাট এটা খামেইছে না তার বাদেও মানুষ তবু মুসলমান হইতে থাকছেন and they maintain. However, when Abdul Rahman III, where about 300, more than 300 years on now, Muslims are ruling. Hose kita tain marazawa bade tan sele Hakam II, he was known as, again very good, very literate, you know, again tara ek jinish khub salah hasla ekbar Spain on northern western area ita jaga muslimanor complete control e aisছিল না তারা জানছেন এরা আইতো না এরা আনা যেত এটা পাহাড়ি জায়গা গিয়া যুদ্ধ করাইতে খুব ডিফিকাল্ট আমরা জানি আমেরিকার কি অবস্থা হইছে আফগানিস্তান তা পাহাড়ি জায়গা মানুষ লুকাইতে পারবো বাদে যাইবা গিয়ে তারা আইবো সো very similar. North of Spain is very, very mountainous and it's very different from most of Spain. So you know tara janchi khameito na. So every summer tara ge ekta attack kori aite tara jagat rakhba lagse no tara far build hoito na bade abar aito kori wala rakhsoi ar ko ekta semi independent state hol asse ekta state ase Zaragoza jagar nam Sarakusha in Arabic was, and what happened was এই জায়গাটা কারণ অনেক তখন স্প্যানিশ মানুষ মুসলমান হয়ে গেছে আর এর মাঝে কয়েক জাতর মানুষ ফলে আরো বলে গিয়ে রুলিং পার্টি ঠিক আছে এর মাঝে হইল গিয়ে আপনার বাবা যারা আমাজি নর্থ আফ্রিকার মানুষ তারাও খুব পাওয়ারফুল কারণ তারারে হেল্পর দিয়া আস্তে স্পেনটা দখল করে হয়েছে তারারও এখন আইয়া মানে পুরা তারাও এস্টাবলিশড হয়ে গেছে তারারও যেন বাবা যে সিন ফরিছে তার রয়েছে না যেমন আর কি however they still claim to be Berber. এর মাঝে হয়েছে কিতা জার্মান হলে কিতা হতো বেশিরভাগ তারা ইস্টার্ন ইউরোপিয়ান এখন যে জায়গা হয় আপনার বসনিয়া ক্রোয়েশিয়া বা স্লোভাক এরিয়া স্ল্যাভস সো স্ল্যাভস রে তারা গিয়া দখল না করিয়া গিয়া হামলা করতে করিয়া মানুষ ধরিয়া নিয়া স্লেভরি ওয়ার্ডটা আইসো স্ল্যাভ তাকিয়া সো আনিয়া বেশিরভাগ তারা ব্যস্ত আনিয়া স্পেন কারণ স্পেন তো because Europe was very, very poor. Spain was the only rich place, and Europe hasn't even been established yet. The idea of Europe is not even established yet. So you had the Umayyad Khilafat of Abdul Rahman, and you had Europe was called Gaul or Frankistan or Balad al-Franc, or they called it Francia. That's whole of Germany, France was known, and England was Anglo-Saxon England. That's how England was known at the time. So বেশিরভাগ তারা ইয়া এই মানুষ স্লেভ হল ব্যস্ত স্পেন সো ইলা হাজারে মানুষ আইছে আর and there was a specific name for these kind of people. They were called Saqaliba, যারা ও Slavic origin. So তারাও এখন আইয়া এখন 100-150 বছর হয়ে গেছে for assimility, but একটা identity crisis এখন আস্তে আস্তে মানে শুরু হয়. Hakam, he had everything under control, but he died quite young and he left about maybe a 10-year-old son. আর সুরাজ একটা আছে সুরাজ ইসলা তান বাইরে হাকামর বাইরে অনতান বদলা দিতা বাদে সুরার ভিতরে আইল দুনিয়াবি মনে মনে বলে হাকামর বাই হাকামর লাখান ডাক থাকতো যদি তারাই নবাই তা আমরা কোনো কন্ট্রোল থাকতো না সো তারা হাকামর যে ওয়াইফ আসলা ওয়াইফের লোকে সালাকিতে করিয়া হাকামরও 10 বছরের ফুয়ারে খালিফা বানিয়ে গেছে 10 বছরের ফুয়ায় আইনো কি তার রাজনীতি করবো সো এর মাঝে একজন I can't remember his name. His name became Al-Mansur later, who came into the inner circle and worked his way up. And Hekida would say, because the Umayyads, because they were clever, Taramani deep north of the attack Kortana, just on the border attack Korea north to Rakileta. Are some semi-independent states. Haron, Mansure Echtaz Nishulugi, Amar Judi Ekta Rajyo Tahe. আর এখন যদি আপনি চাই না ডাইরেক্ট কন্ট্রোল করলে এটা আমি একটা রেজিস্ট্যান্স করব আর আপনি যদি আমার একটু সেমি অটোনমাস দিলাই বলে ঠিক আছে আমার আপনার নামে আমার বা আপনার নামে এই ধরুন বা জায়গাটা আমার সত্তা আমি আমার চালাই মাসে একটা কম্প্রোমাইজ করে ওলা একটা আর ওইসে কিন্তু তারা they continue to resist against the Christians as well, because of that. What this Al-Mansur did was he launched an attack against Zaragoza and other places, and he made a huge attack into the northern province of into the mountainous region. Arekta kota sil tarar, which is an absolute false claim. Hoite hoizono Isa alayhis salamor bai otan close hawarin gya ono gya buzin settle Islam. Ar naam hoilogi Saint James the Compostela. So no church ekta banaise. Ar this Al-Mansur I church ta bange tarar belokta. He brought it back to Cordoba, At Zaragoza Zuria Hamla Korea, he made it part of the Emirat for Khilafat. So Tara resist Korto Hori. So this is the first time I was saying Ikramul Muslim is so important that we should Eraguzuna Hamla, wherever we say Kunshuma Krishtiano Tara Atfate Sunna. But this is the first time they make an alliance with the Christians to resist against this Al-Mansur and the Khilafat. So this is like the real first fitna here we have. We had other fitnas in Spain, but it was reconciled. But this is the first time when they made hands with the kuffar. That's the one thing you must not do. Because Er Age Abdurrahman, his son, like I said last time, when from Constantinople, today's Istanbul, because the Abbasids were still making offense, they wanted to make alliance with the Umayyads. Knowing the history between the Umayyads and the Abbasids, they thought, we can make some attack. But they refused. The Umayyads refused. There's no way we can fight our Muslim brothers, make an alliance with the Christians. It's impossible. But sadly, this time round, for the family known as Banu Casillas. I don't know if anyone knows the football goalkeeper of Spain. When they won the World Cup, the goalkeeper was a captain. His name was Casillas, and he's from more or less likely to be from that family of Banu Qasi. So these families go back. They're very, very strong. They were indigenous Spanish people, so they wanted the independence now. They didn't want to be totally ruled. So this is where the first fitna starts. And from this fitna, more fitna comes along. And before you know it, within 50 years, less than 50 years, the whole Khilafat breaks down. Breaks down to the point now Muslims, it's known as the first age of the Taifa, Tarar independence. So you have Seville, one kingdom, Cordoba, one kingdom, Granada, one kingdom, Murcia, Zaragoza is a kingdom. They're all independent kingdoms now. Just like today, how some little Muslim nations, not united front or anything. So this is what happens the first time. So time goes by, and the Christians are slowly they're offensing. They're becoming much stronger. Karon tarar bitu to tararita, they want to take control because this was under the Christian control, so they want to take it back. But the important thing here to understand, the people from the north that are attacking, they're not indigenous Spanish people. These are actually these are people that belong to those small ethnic groups, as well as lots of people coming from France, from Christian France, and joining them to make the attack. Because most of the Spanish people are Muslims. They're following the Maliki school. They're on Orthodox Islam. Nothing dodgy, nothing weird about them as such. But these people are attacking, and Muslims, they can't unite themselves. So Tara, they call for help from Africa. And Africa, North Africa, Morocco, today is Marrakesh. These people are still becoming Muslim, believe it or not. Spain was one of the first places, outside of the Central Arabian area to embrace Islam. So there were more Muslims in Spain at this time than most of the part of the world. And there was more Muslims, you could say, in Spain than there was in Egypt. People of Egypt were still Coptic Christians. They haven't embraced. Majority of the people were still Christians. Majority of the people in Egypt become Muslim after the Second Crusade. Not even the First Crusade. After the Second Crusade, that's when they really become Muslim, because they see the ugly side of their so-called fellow Christians, and they start embracing Islam on a mass level. So most of Spain is Muslim before places like, forget about Bangladesh. Islam hasn't even reached that far in the heartland, or even Delhi and places like this. Islam is still entering, whereas Spain is a fully established Islamic state. And now they're fighting amongst themselves, and these Murabitun, known as, establishing themselves and really establishing proper Islam. One thing is, your people becoming Muslim, and another thing is to learn Din. We have to learn complete Din, isn't it? There's a lot to learn about. So they're still asserting all of this. However, this one man, subhanAllah, may Allah, grant him the highest rank in Jannah. His name was Yusuf ibn Tafshil. Of his mother was half Ghanaian. and his father was most likely to be from Marrakesh or from that area, from the Atlas area of Morocco, southern Morocco. Now he builds an army, a people, and establishes this Islamic state there, and he crosses over to Spain and helps the Muslims. And so he helps the Muslims. He doesn't unite the Muslim, but he fights the Christians and he defeats them. And then he goes back to Morocco because his capital is in Marrakesh, so he goes back there. And what happens now, the Muslims, they're fighting amongst themselves again, and they're not united. So the Christians are again trying to take the land back, you know. So you had one powerful kingdom, in the kingdom of Seville was the most powerful then. So what does he do? Because they don't want to accept an Amirul Mu'mineen, a head, you know. So, but they can't defend the Christians against the Christians. So they ask for Yusuf bin Tafshil again. So what does Yusuf bin Tafshil? He comes, but he defeats the Christians again. But he realizes these Muslims they don't have Ikramul Muslimin in them. You know, they're lacking this quality. They're great. Yes, they have a very civilized society. Alim, Hafiz. I used to hear this as a child, and I found it very hard to believe. You know, Alim Hafiz Alim Hafiz. But in history, actually, it shows they were so literate. These people is unbelievable, and more research till now is showing the proof of this. Spain was like this. Alim Hafiz. You know, yes, this is a very, very civilized society, but these people are not united. So he wrote a letter to Imam Ghazali. You know, itaman shuru to ekhano khurtule tararu freh to, you know, danda tolanto. You know what I mean? Alla tara ami ai tarare help yoru gele tara war vai khore abar kishno khola what's this? You know, tarare age tikkura lagbo. So Imam Ghazali replied back, you have to do what you have to do. You know, fix these people together. So he launched an attack. Ekhe Korea Zara, you know, was against him. Tarare Mariaduria got the people together. And he got the people together and they had a huge battle. One of the Castilians, so even northern Spain was very divided, the Christians. You had Kingdom of Aragon, Navarra, you had Kingdom of Castile, and I think the Kingdom of Portugal is just coming about. You know, this is very much in the north of Spain. So Tara, the King of Castile, Alfonso III or something like that, he was very, very, you know, confident he's going to come and win this battle. It's a huge battle, one of the biggest battles ever fought in that land. And Yusuf bin Tashfin as well, he had his Saqaliba, you know, you had the Arabs, you had the Spanish people, and he had another group of people, the Berbers, the new Berbers, and they had a huge battle. And they won the battle. After winning this battle, he consolidated, so by then, sadly, 1/3 of northern, of Spain has been taken by the Christians, you know, and he still takes a lot back for the Muslims again. However, he establishes this united front now. So all of today's, say, up to Madrid was again regained by the Almurabids. So Madrid was originally built by the Muslims because the original capital of the Christians before the Muslims came was Toledo. But when the Muslims took over Toledo, they made another small city called Madrid to protect Toledo from the northern Christians. And, you know, the Christians later, much later, they made this their capital and so forth because they couldn't expand on Toledo anymore. So what happened with the Murabitun? Because siege engine, like big, huge things you need to take down towers, the Murabitun didn't have this technology, so they couldn't take down Toledo. He failed on that. However, for good 100 years or so, or less, he had it secure. And then what happened? From Marrakesh alone, another group of people came, known as Almohads in European history. Almuhidun. These guys, they had a bit of a dodgy Aqidah. One of them kind of claimed to be the Mahdi and things like that. And they didn't follow the Maliki fiqh. As we even know today, you know, all the way from Libya to even Nigeria, all the Muslims, all along there, they follow the Maliki fiqh. Like we have many, like, you know, great scholars of the Maliki fiqh in Mauritania and places like that, in Morocco as well, in all these areas. But Spain was actually the center of the Maliki fiqh anyway. And these people, they didn't follow the Maliki fiqh, the Aqidah and things like that based on these things. They had their own kind of slightly dodgy thing going on. So they were very brutal against the Almurabitun. They launched an attack, or a genocide almost, against them and took them down and took over all of Morocco, western part of Algeria, and then they came to Spain. And the second generation, they helped the Spanish Muslims again against the Christians. However, the Christians, was still harassing. And this is the time, we're into 1100s now, the crusade launch. The Pope is calling, because at that time, you had the Seljuks, because this is all very relative. The Seljuks from the east have taken over most of today's Turkey, Anatolia, and they're really planning on to take on Constantinople. Because the famous hadith is that, his army, and he's going to be so great and so forth, that's going to take down Constantinople. And everyone wants to be this person who fulfills this prophecy, and the Seljuks were hard on this. So the Europeans are like, look, these guys are really coming for us. And at that time, Salahuddin as well, he is really uniting a front and slowly taking back a lot of land from the Christians and really making the attack on Jerusalem, And he actually requests help from the Almohadun. Salahuddin asks for help, against the Crusader front. Let's finish them off together. But the Almohadun, reject. They decline the offer. They decline to help him because of their difference in Aqidah, sadly. Anyhow, the second guy from the Almohadun, he was fairly good, fights with the Christian. The third one comes along, he's just no good. He doesn't have the strategic ability. He's very bad in decision making. And then they, have a battle. And all his advisors say, don't have the battle in this space, because you're going to lose. He goes against them. And as the battle rages on, he can, before even any sense of him losing, he runs from the battlefield. If your leader, your Amir, runs away, then everyone will lose the morale. So they lose this. And this was a real gain for the Christians, And after this is when so this is the second wave of Taifa, problem. So the Almohadun leave Spain and leave the Muslims to themselves. Now from that they're again fighting amongst themselves. The Berbers are fighting against the Arabs. The Arabs are fighting against the Spanish. The Saqaliba are fighting as well. Everyone's fighting everyone, and they cannot be united. One man comes along from the Banu Hud, originally a Yemeni, who from 500 years ago when they first came. These Arabs, mashallah, they can really trace their lineage. After that and everything. So he came along and he got some people together. They had a battle, they lost the battle. And when he battled Luzar, no one has faith in him. They select another guy. Long time goes by, 20, 30 years. Amir Tara, electoral, but Kamena, Christian Roma Tara Faruna. Tarahali Luzu. Now we've gone to the 1230s, 1236 to be precise. Tara Christmas Eve, Christian Musulman Hazia, Musulman dress up ya, Lukaya Maizaya, Cordoban main gate of Vitra, Aya, Tarato, Maramari Shuru Korea, Ermaze Hobor Fataise, Tarabashargese, Bashaiche from the north, Aya, Ermaze Tara Armazaro politics, so Ibn Banu Hud, he was the guy, Ibn Hud was supposed to come and help, but Onomaze Tara spy Tare Buddhi Desano, Na Tumino helpful like Gizawalak tonight, it's okay, they'll get it under control, and he thinks it's okay. Shobe Nizor Zarzir Motlovordai, I help Corina. So Cordoba is the main center. So Tara Cordoba the whole Corilla 1236, 1248 Seville, and at that time, another guy, Afnara, I don't know if you've heard the Nasrid kingdom of Granada. So Banu Ahmad, he comes along and he's about to, they elected him in Cordoba, but because he was strict in his ruling, so because he was strict. So you to Seville or strict as a governor, that's when he comes to Granada and makes his kingdom from a Jewish guy who kind of established his little kingdom, helping another Berber. And this Jewish guy, his name Samuel. His name was Samuel, but in Jewish history, the golden age of the Jews was in Islamic Spain, believe it or not. So Jewish history they really claim, obviously they claim to Ibrahim alayhi salam, yeah? But they really claim everything from Musa alayhi salam onwards. And the greatest warrior they regard is Dawood alayhi salam. That's what they always say, King David. And that's one of the reasons why they don't accept Isa alayhi salam as Masih, as the Messiah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised, because he's not from the house of David. He's from the house of Levi, which is another lineage coming from Yusuf alayhi salam and so forth. So Isa alayhi salam, if he was the Masih, then he would have come from the house of David. So they regard Dawud alayhi salam very, very heavy, like the warrior king. So imagine they label this guy the second David. In their whole history, they never called anyone else second David, except for this guy, this Samuel guy, who really helped I can't remember now, the Berber Amir that was in control of Granada. So what this Banu Ahmad he does, he goes and settles in Granada, and he makes a truce to give 50 men to take over Cordoba to the Castilian king, because Suditano Punchash Shunode Christian Tarahuise Tandra Bishposoroma Tanasataitonai, আর থান জায়গাটা তান হলো সেফ থাকবো ও হিসাবে থান জায়গা তান সেফ রাখবা লাগি খ্রিস্টান হলে তান হেল্প করেছেন 50 জন সৈন্য দিয়া আর ও 20 বছরের মাঝে তাই বাক্কাসালাকি দিয়ে কাম করলেছেন মানে যে জায়গা তারা বাউন্ডারি দিছিল তাই হেরে হেরে বাউন্ডারিটা খালি বাড়াইতে থাকছে সো তারা তো ফুলা কথা দিল তারা মুসলমানদের কষ্ট দিত না কিছু করতো না তারা যা কন্ট্রোল নেই so as the southern coast from Malaga and a few other places in Granada was under the Muslims, and in that time you had another guy who's called in the time of the Almohads, Maimonides. You probably have heard of Maimonides. They call him the second Moses. So in the Islamic period you have the Jewish golden age, you have the second Moses and you have the second David. I'm not here he's the second Muhammad. Never. La hawla wa quwwata illa billah. We wouldn't even say the second Moses or second Jesus or second anything like that. Nobi. Kuno shumila amda khairila kuno khairu tulona kortana nobillo. How can you? How dare you? Wala tara just because this Musa, this Moses or Musa, that was his name, because he was very smart, very eloquent, very clever. They call him the second Moses, the Rambam. Amarzalai can you say? It's the 6 articles of stuff. So he is the one who establishes this. If their religion was so ancient, how come this guy is establishing your Aqidah now after so many thousands of years? It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand. Anyhow, this second Moses comes about then. You have the second David. And you have many, many other Jewish prominent scholars, Sharput, and many others. And some of them, what they do, they go to Egypt and they go to other parts of the Muslim world to be safe from the Christians. Remember, the Christians persecuted the Jews more than anyone else. Sorry.
I heard that the second Moses.
The Moses, yeah, Maimonides.
He was actually a Muslim, or his teachers were Muslims.
Yeah, his teachers were Muslim. He was not Muslim.
Oh, he was a Muslim.
No, he was not Muslim. He comes from a long lineage of Jewish. Of Jews. Yeah. They have, the Jews are at least those Jews, not the Ashkenazi Jews, at least those Jews, they can actually trace back a very, very long history of their family. Yes, they all had Muslim teachers. I mean, there's no way you could avoid this. Yeah. It's impossible. At the same time, you had Ibn Rushd and many other players. This was the same time Ibn Rushd was around. So you had many, many great scholars of Islam coming out that time. Even though this was a very turmoil point, but this was a golden age for scholars, you could say, of any religion, if you want to put it like this. And these Jews, some of them went north and became Christians, and there was one Jew that came to England, and he was the doctor for Henry, which one, I can't remember, 1 or 2, there's so many Henrys, but definitely not 8, because Henry the 8th came much later. So he's the first one. He was actually in England teaching people what reading and writing is. People are so illiterate. Manush oto oshikito asil izaga. O ehudi he Christian oise. O ya London aise aya o pashalagi Henry. I can't remember Henry 2nd or 3rd. I can't remember now. He tar chikicha kore yar manshore dekhar jeno lekha pora ki jinish. Tara emon asil. Like oto oshikito asil. It's unbelievable. The first English king to be literate was Edward Longshank. I don't know if you've heard of Braveheart, who fought William Wallace. Yeah, he was the first English king to be literate. The others don't know even, they couldn't even read right. Literally, they tara kunu otoshi kita tara mani ekta namal tara ita, it was out the capacity. That's how backward this place was. And this Jew who became a Christian comes and opens the door, shows them, 800 years ago, like there's another place. Manush kizat advanced life tara tap funny, they go running water. What's this? He was shocked. It's so backward, it was so bad, this place. Karar was not afnar Tower of London. Ehonza la design. Ita ilas ne ita lakhrir ekta gorasil. Mashallah la lakhrir gorotaxe. Until about say 1400s. But that's the tara ita mani lintar dia shop mozbut khoi banaisi.
They even created the Muslims created is a device how to tell the time, but through fountain.
Oh yes, yes. Water clock.
Yeah.
Water clock. Yes. Water clock.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Funny. Even this was applied in Delhi, all across the Muslim world. Yeah. And it's more time calculation different as lekonku, amda like sobish konta like 60 minutes makes an hour, but he show more 30 minutes made an hour. So every 30 minutes by there, then you have to change the time, the water, so you know, time changes. Very, very advanced. And area, France, Germany, very backward. Kunu money like solar. It's just unbelievable how it was. Dunia ta money. Ekon like ekon alhamdulillah Bangladesh ta to bakka advanced is. Amra sudah dah tezela Bangladesh la sil London la sil. It was completely the other way around. It's just unbelievable. So this Jew who becomes a Christian is introducing all of this advanced civilization, and they're like, attack and some of them coming back from crusade. Aro 200 years later, tara soap kita tara zanchina, tara crusade was about tara is about when Kutus about it's about 1500s. We're talking about 300 years later when Kutus kicked all of them out. Salahuddin obviously saved Jerusalem, but he didn't he didn't have enough time, and then his sons and his grandson, they fought. Sadly, they didn't have his kind of ability. But Kutus and Baybars later, they're the ones, or 200 years later, they're the ones that kicked the Crusaders out completely. And when these Crusaders come back to you, they bring soap back with them. And they introduce soap for the first time. Can you believe this? It's unbelievable. Now these people talk like, I'm doesn't want to hygiene kitazanina just because we wash our feet before we do namaz. I'm not, stuff. It's unbelievable how unhygienic these people are. Anyhow, so going back to Spain now, tara ola ekon manush, they kind of, because when you live in a very, very civilized society, you're not hard ridden. And when you live in rough, tara hard ridden, tara tolwar boro, everything ready. So tara ya dohol kullese. Sadly, one of the saddest thing is really truly how tara kila dohol kullo. Tara kunusoma falona, because amdar a unity ta asilna. Or unity ta arani dai, as tohan we say. And same thing is now the ummah suffering because we don't have unity. And unity doesn't mean, I have to look like you, I have to dress like you, I have to walk like you. That's not what necessarily means unity. Unity means, firstly, whatever I'm doing, I have to have la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Whatever I'm doing, I have to do it for Allah. I can't have this thing of me, of this nationalism. I can't have this thing that I'm better than him. He's a different kind. I have to see my fellow Muslim brother for the love of Allah, for the sake of Allah. This is what's really lacking. And this is what was lacking. There's one thing that I've learned, if I've learned anything from reading all of this, is that the reason why the Muslims lost is because of that disunity, that dividing. And the reason why when the Muslims gain again is because of the unity. When the Ottomans, because even though the Muslims were losing Spain in the west, from the east they were rising. They were coming closer and closer and closer. And even when the Crusaders come in, how did they come in? They came in because there was so much division. You had three Khalifas. You had the Umayyad Khalifa, you had the Fatimid Khalifa, and you had the Abbas Khalifa. How can you have three Khalifas? That doesn't even make sense. You want to have one Khalifa. You can have many different nations for one Khalifa. We had three Khalifas at one point. So that's how they entered. And this golden time of Spain, everything was finished. First thing they did when they came into Cordoba, I really recommend you go. Inshallah, I'll talk about a bit more about next time. Fola ayo otoboro masjid, soishata kuti ek masjidor vitre. Arita kuti ais afnar 1000 bosoror ufre easily. Fola foundation was placed around 1300 years ago. The masjid was fully complete by the 900s. So we're talking about 1100 years ago. So even the completion, so astata building afnar 1100 bochoro furana. You know, soishata kuti abo zelaro la ruise. Ar tara bitre hamaye geu kita horse pantu fartuna kori tara itar bitre geu church banai rese. Tara murti turti shokta dia. Same thing, Seville ola, like it's the 4th biggest cathedral in the world. Otoboro masjid asil. Aro masjidre tara nabangia masjidur ufre ki khabar dia church banai rese. Painting kori dia. You know, sadly. You know, if Afrarudi knows a tavarta, a dechle huilona, wow, Muslim kitana kita kursi. But all of that went to waste, lost. Because why? Because the fear of Allah, the love of my fellow Muslim for the sake of Allah was gone. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah wasn't really there, live in action. Sorry.
One thing that we get wrong is that we assume we can unite our minds, but that's impossible. Because there's too many contradictions. But what we can do, despite we have contradictions, we have to unite our hearts.
Yeah, so I'll rectify something you said. I wouldn't say it's contradictions. We have differences.
Yeah,
differences is not contradiction. So differences is not contradiction. Difference is fine. There's nothing wrong. As long as our core, you know, our core is fixed. You know, we are Quran and Sunnah, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. We know our 5 times Salah. No Muslim is going to come and say, no, there's 3 times. You know what I mean? No Muslim is going to say, Fajr is not 2 rak'ah. Oh, yeah. So therefore, you know, I'm not going there. You know, no Muslim is going to say 3 rakat Fajr. You know, we know our basics. Yes, we're going to have our difference. Nothing wrong with having different. Difference makes it beautiful. I personally think, because I've been to these places, and I've seen how the Malikis do namaz. It's beautiful. I've been to Sarajevo. I've seen how you think we're Hanafi. They're Hanafi on another level. You know, I've seen their namaz as well. I've seen the Shafis do namaz as well. It's beautiful. It's so amazing that our deen gives us this, you know. So we have to put that aside and not worry about these things too much and leave this to the scholars. This is not for me and you to talk about as such. So inshallah, we'll try to, you know, put this on. Inshallah, next week I'll talk about the last phase of it. Yeah. We got there.
So Q&A.
Any questions, anyone? No.
Okay. Did you cover the point? So I've been to Granada myself.
Okay, I'm going to talk about Granada next week because that's the last phase.
So did you speak about, you know, they translated Latin to Arabic?
Yeah.
Is that next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next week, yeah, because let me stop recording. I don't want to spoil it.